Japan just built something so invisible, China's fleet is now useless. What if I told you that Japan just completed a warship so advanced, so impossibly invisible that it renders China's entire naval fleet completely obsolete? Not obsolete as in outdated, obsolete as in blind, useless, unable to see the weapons already locked onto their positions. This isn't science fiction, this technology exists, it's deployed, and it changes everything about who controls the Pacific Ocean. Today we're going deep inside Japan's most classified naval program. We'll examine the technology that American defense analysts are calling the most significant naval advancement in 30 years, and we'll explain exactly why China's massive fleet investment might be worthless. But first, you need to understand something critical about naval warfare. It's not about having the biggest ships, it's about seeing what your enemy cannot see. And right now, Japan has achieved something extraordinary in that race. Let's begin. Imagine you're a Chinese naval commander. You've invested $300 billion building the world's largest navy. You have aircraft carriers, you have guided missile destroyers, you have the biggest submarine fleet on the planet. Now imagine that every single one of your vessels is completely blind. Your radar sees nothing but ocean, your sonar detects nothing but fish, your targeting systems display phantom contacts that don't exist. Meanwhile, enemy weapons are already firing. You won't know until the missiles are in the air. This is the nightmare scenario Chinese military planners are losing sleep over, and according to multiple defense intelligence reports, this nightmare just became reality. Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force recently completed deployment of their new class of guided missile destroyers. These ships don't look like traditional warships, they look like fishing boats or nothing at all. The secret lies in something called active cancellation sonar. It's a technology that was theoretical just 5 years ago. Now it's operational, and it works. Active cancellation sonar works like noise-canceling headphones for the ocean. Your ship emits a sound wave that perfectly mirrors any incoming sonar ping. When the two waves meet, they annihilate each other. To an enemy submarine's sonar, your vessel simply doesn't exist. No reflection, no signature, no detection. This technology turns the entire concept of submarine warfare upside down. For decades, submarines ruled the seas because surface vessels couldn't find them. Now, surface vessels equipped with this system can approach undetected. They can listen. They can target. They can strike, and China's navy wasn't built to fight a war it can't see. Let me explain exactly how devastating this is. China has approximately 73 submarines in active service. They range from nuclear-powered attack submarines to diesel-electric boats designed for coastal operations. These vessels represent the backbone of Chinese naval strategy. They would be the first weapons deployed in any conflict near Taiwan or in the South China Sea. But here's what China's strategists didn't anticipate. Japan didn't just develop anti-submarine technology. Japan developed something far more sophisticated. Japan's new destroyers carry a system that doesn't just detect submarines. It makes the detecting vessel completely invisible to all forms of sonar detection. The system is called the Advanced Hull Sonar Array, combined with active signature cancellation technology. Intelligence sources indicate the system has been tested extensively in waters near the Philippines and in the Philippine Sea. The results, according to defense analysts who reviewed classified after-action reports, were shocking. Test vessels approached to within 2 nautical miles of simulated enemy submarines. Zero detection, zero countermeasures. The submarines never knew the destroyers were there. 2 nautical miles is point-blank range for modern torpedoes. At that distance, you have maybe 90 seconds from detection to impact. In the tests, enemy submarines never even knew they were being stalked. Now imagine this technology in a real combat scenario. Chinese submarine commanders would be sitting in their control rooms believing they're undetected. They'd be running silent, maintaining radio silence, confident in their concealment. Meanwhile, Japanese destroyers would be circling them like wolves, listening to every propeller beat, recording every transmission. And when the order came, those submarines would have less than 2 minutes to react. In naval warfare, 2 minutes is nothing. It's an eternity when you're facing a torpedo. Japan has deployed at least 4 vessels equipped with this technology. The Maya-class destroyers, specifically the JS Maya and JS Haguro, completed their shakedown operations in 2022. Since then, they've been conducting what the Japanese Ministry of Defense describes as advanced training exercises in the waters east of Taiwan. But defense observers who track Japanese naval movements believe something else is happening. These ships are operating in patterns that suggest they're mapping Chinese submarine routes. They're learning the acoustic signatures of every vessel in the Chinese fleet. They're building a database that could be used to target those submarines in a matter of minutes. This is intelligence gathering of unprecedented value. And China's navy has no idea it's happening. Why? Because they can't see the ships doing it. Let me pause here and address something important. I'm not suggesting Japan has achieved perfect invisibility. No technology is absolute, but what Japan has achieved is a significant tactical advantage. For the first time in modern naval history, surface ships can approach submarine threats without being detected. That's a game changer. And it's only the beginning, because the invisibility technology goes even further. Beyond sonar invisibility, Japan has developed something equally devastating for Chinese naval planning. Their newest destroyers feature radar-absorbing materials and structural designs that make them nearly invisible to radar detection. The JS Kaga and JS Izumo, Japan's largest warships, have undergone extensive modifications since their initial construction. Steel superstructure panels have been replaced with composite materials designed to absorb and scatter radar waves. The angular design eliminates the flat surfaces that radar relies upon for strong returns. Think about what this means tactically. A standard Chinese destroyer can detect surface contacts out to approximately 200 kilometers under ideal conditions. But against these modified Japanese vessels, detection range drops to under 50 kilometers. And at 50 kilometers, you might as well be blind. Here's why. Anti-ship missiles need targeting data to reach their targets. Radar detection provides that data. Without it, missiles can't guide themselves. They become expensive fireworks falling into the ocean. Chinese naval doctrine relies heavily on the People's Liberation Army Navy's surface-to-ship missile arsenal. Missiles like the YJ-18 supersonic cruise missile represent the backbone of Chinese anti-ship strategy. These weapons can travel at nearly the speed of sound and strike targets hundreds of kilometers away. But those missiles need targeting information. Without it, they're useless. Japan's stealth destroyers can approach well within the effective range of Chinese missiles without being detected. At that range, Japan's own weapons systems become devastatingly effective. The Standard Missile-2 and SM-6 systems on these destroyers can engage multiple targets with precision. And because the Japanese ships are undetected, the Chinese vessels would have no warning. The first the Chinese would know of the attack would be the sound of missiles leaving their tubes. By then, it would be too late. This is the definition of asymmetric warfare. China built a massive navy designed to overwhelm opponents through numbers and missile saturation. Japan countered with technology that makes those numbers irrelevant. A dozen Chinese warships firing hundreds of missiles at phantom contacts while Japanese weapons destroy them from invisible positions. That's the scenario Japanese defense planners are preparing for. And according to military analysts, it's a scenario China has no good answer to. Japan's investment in this technology has been methodical and focused. While China was building aircraft carriers and massive surface fleets, Japan was investing in systems that make those fleets vulnerable. It's a classic case of asymmetric strategic planning. China spent years building a navy designed to project power. Japan built a navy designed to negate power projection. Which strategy is more effective? The early evidence suggests Japan's approach is winning. Now we need to discuss something even more cutting-edge. Something that defense experts believe will revolutionize naval warfare within the next 5 years. Something that Japan is developing right now in complete secrecy. Quantum magnetometry. This technology is exactly what it sounds like. It uses quantum mechanics principles to detect the magnetic signatures of vessels at unprecedented ranges. Traditional magnetic anomaly detection requires ships to pass within a few kilometers of detection equipment. Quantum magnetometers can detect vessel signatures from dozens of kilometers away. The physics behind this are complex, but here's what you need to know. Every large metal vessel creates a tiny distortion in Earth's magnetic field. This distortion is incredibly subtle, Chinese letter ED, by natural magnetic variations. Traditional sensors couldn't distinguish these variations from background noise. Quantum magnetometers can. They use atomic-scale precision measurements to isolate vessel signatures from all other magnetic interference. The result is detection capability that exceeds anything currently deployed. According to defense industry sources, Japan is developing quantum magnetometry systems for deployment on their next-generation destroyers. These systems would complement existing sonar arrays and provide an entirely new detection capability. Why does this matter? Because it closes the last gap in Japanese anti-submarine warfare capability. Current sonar systems work well in deep water. But near coastlines, where Chinese submarines would likely operate in any conflict, acoustic conditions become chaotic. Thermal layers, underwater geography, and shipping noise create interference that degrades sonar performance. Quantum magnetometry works regardless of acoustic conditions. It detects metal, not sound. A submarine hiding in a thermal layer near the ocean floor would still create a magnetic signature, and a quantum magnetometer would detect it. This technology transforms coastal waters from sanctuary to trap. Chinese submarines would have nowhere to hide. Every approach to Taiwan, every patrol in disputed waters, would expose those vessels to instant detection. Japan's development timeline for this technology remains classified, but defense observers estimate initial operational capability within 3 to 5 years. When that capability becomes operational, it will fundamentally change the strategic calculus in the Western Pacific. China's submarine fleet, currently numbering over 70 vessels, would become vulnerable to a completely new detection modality. The years of investment in submarine concealment technology would be negated by a single technological breakthrough. This is the invisible weapon Japan has built, not a missile, not a torpedo. A detection system that makes China's most valuable naval assets obsolete. And here's what makes this even more significant for you to understand. China has built its entire naval expansion strategy around submarine deterrence. The DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missile, often called the carrier killer, requires Chinese submarines to provide targeting data. Without those submarines undetected in the battle zone, the carrier killer missiles become useless. Japan's technology doesn't just make Chinese submarines vulnerable. It dismantles the entire strategic architecture China has built around them. Let me walk you through this logically. China's anti-ship strategy depends on submarines maintaining position near American carrier groups. Those submarines detect carrier movements and transmit targeting data to shore-based missile batteries. The missiles then engage targets based on that intelligence. This strategy assumes submarines can approach within hundreds of kilometers of American forces undetected. Japan's new technology destroys that assumption completely. Japanese destroyers could detect those Chinese submarines from extreme range. They could track their movements, they could alert American forces, and they could engage those submarines with torpedoes before they reached targeting range. The entire Chinese anti-carrier strategy collapses if its submarines can't approach undetected. And with Japan's quantum magnetometry development, that's exactly what becomes impossible. This is why Chinese military planners are concerned. This is why defense analysts are calling Japan's technology the most significant naval advancement in decades. And this is why we're talking about it right now. Here's something most coverage completely misses. Japan didn't develop this technology alone. American defense contractors have been deeply involved in every aspect of Japan's naval advancement. The active cancellation sonar system was developed through a joint research program between Mitsubishi and Lockheed Martin. The radar-absorbing materials are licensed technology originally developed for American stealth aircraft. The quantum magnetometry research is jointly funded by DARPA and Japan's Acquisition, Technology and Logistics Agency. This is American military technology, exported to an ally deployed against potential adversaries. The strategic implications are profound. America has effectively armed Japan with the tools to neutralize China's naval advantage. This reduces the pressure on American forces in the Pacific. It creates a layered defense network where Japan handles submarine threats while American assets focus on other priorities. This is exactly what American Pacific strategy has been building toward. The defense network surrounding China isn't just American hardware. It's allied capabilities that multiply American power without American casualties. Japan's invisible navy represents a force multiplier for American strategy. It extends the effective range of American detection capabilities. It creates additional obstacles for Chinese naval operations. And it does all of this through allied forces rather than direct American intervention. Think about this from Chinese strategic planning perspective. American aircraft carriers are obvious targets. They broadcast their position simply by existing. Chinese missiles and submarines know where to look. But Japanese destroyers are invisible. They operate in the shadows. They detect threats before American forces even know those threats exist, and they feed that intelligence back to American command structures. This creates a surveillance network across the Western Pacific that China cannot penetrate. Every Chinese vessel that moves, every submarine that transits, every aircraft that takes off gets tracked by allied forces China cannot detect or neutralize. The invisible navy isn't just Japan protecting itself. It's a forward element of American power projection that extends detection and engagement capabilities throughout the region. And this brings us to something even more significant. The technology Japan has developed isn't static, it's evolving. The capabilities I've described represent where this technology is today, but the development trajectory points towards something far more powerful. Next-generation systems currently in research phases could extend detection ranges by factors of 10. Active cancellation technology could become so sophisticated that entire carrier strike groups could operate undetected. Quantum magnetometry could provide real-time tracking of every metal vessel in the Pacific Ocean. If those capabilities mature, China's naval investment becomes worthless, not diminished, not challenged, worthless. The $300 billion China spent building the world's largest navy would purchase nothing but targets. Let me show you the numbers. China currently operates 3 aircraft carriers with a 4th nearing completion. They have approximately 350 major surface combatants. Their submarine fleet exceeds 70 vessels. Total naval defense spending exceeds $60 billion annually. Japan operates 2 helicopter carriers, approximately 50 destroyers, and around 20 submarines. Annual naval defense spending is roughly $40 billion. On paper, China has overwhelming numerical advantage, but numbers don't win wars, positioning wins wars, detection wins wars, and in those categories Japan has achieved decisive advantage. This is why Chinese military analysts are so concerned about Japanese naval development. The technology asymmetry threatens to make China's numerical advantage meaningless. You can't overwhelm an enemy you can't find, you can't strike an enemy you can't target, and you can't defend against an enemy you can't see. Japan has achieved something extraordinary. They've created a naval force that operates almost entirely below the detection threshold, and they've done it in partnership with American defense technology. Now let's examine how this changes actual combat scenarios. Let me walk you through exactly how a conflict would unfold with Japan's invisible technology in play. Scenario: Chinese forces attempt to blockade Taiwan. This is the most discussed conflict scenario in the Western Pacific. Let's see how Japan's technology changes this dynamic. Day 1. Chinese naval forces begin positioning. Aircraft carriers move to strike positions, destroyers take screening positions, submarines transit toward patrol areas. Everything follows standard Chinese naval doctrine for a Taiwan blockade scenario. Now here's what happens that China doesn't see. Japanese P-1 maritime patrol aircraft detect submarine transits using advanced magnetic anomaly detection. They feed targeting data to Maya-class destroyers operating north of Taiwan. Those destroyers begin tracking Chinese submarine movements but remain completely undetected. Day 2, Chinese submarines take up patrol positions. They're confident they're undetected. They're maintaining radio silence. They're ready to provide targeting data for anti-ship missile strikes, but Japanese destroyers have been listening to every propeller beat, every diesel engine cycle, every ballast tank adjustment. They know exactly where each submarine is positioned. They know their patrol patterns. They know their communication schedules. Day 3, the blockade is forming. Chinese surface vessels begin establishing patrol lines. They're broadcasting electronically, creating a picture of their positions that is visible to everyone. The Japanese destroyers are still invisible. They've moved into positions that cut off submarine approach routes. They're armed with advanced torpedoes that can engage targets at ranges exceeding 20 kilometers. Day 4, hostilities begin. Chinese submarines attempt to transmit targeting data. The moment they power up their communication systems, Japanese destroyers know their positions precisely. The first Japanese torpedo is already in the water. This scenario isn't speculation. It's based on actual exercise data from US-Japan training operations. The scenarios have been wargamed repeatedly, and in every iterati. Japan's invisible technology dramatically shifts the outcome. In conventional wargaming without Japan's new technology, Chinese forces achieve local superiority within 72 hours. With Japan's technology, Chinese submarine losses exceed 60% within the first 48 hours. Surface vessels experience similar losses because they can't detect incoming attacks. These numbers come from defense industry sources and reflect classified wargame results, but the pattern is consistent across multiple scenarios. Japan's invisible technology changes everything. Technology advantages compound in naval warfare. You don't need to sink every enemy ship, you need to make them afraid to operate. Japan's technology creates that fear. Chinese commanders will know their vessels are exposed, they'll hesitate to deploy them. And hesitation loses wars. That's a critical insight. Japan's invisible navy doesn't just create tactical advantage, it creates strategic uncertainty. Chinese military planners know their forces are vulnerable. They don't know exactly how vulnerable, and that uncertainty paralyses decision-making. In a crisis, paralysis means defeat. Now we need to examine how China is responding to this technological challenge, because here's what you need to understand about Chinese military strategy. They don't accept losing quietly. China is aware of Japan's technological advancement. Intelligence reports indicate Chinese defense establishments have been analyzing Japanese naval developments for years. They've observed the exercises, they've studied the public information, and they've drawn conclusions that concern their strategic planners. What have they concluded? The only way to counter detection technology is through overwhelming numbers. If Japan can detect individual submarines, China needs to deploy so many submarines that some will always get through. If Japan can track surface vessels, China needs to launch so many missiles that some will reach their targets regardless of interception. This is classic Chinese strategic thinking. When you can't match quality, you compensate with quantity. But here's the problem with that approach. It requires massive investment in hardware that remains fundamentally vulnerable to the technology it's designed to counter. China's response has been to accelerate shipbuilding even further. New submarine facilities are under construction. New destroyer programs are in development. The goal isn't technological parity, it's numerical saturation. But this strategy has a fatal flaw. Every new vessel China builds is another target for Japan's detection systems. More ships don't mean more effective coverage. They mean more metal in the water generating magnetic signatures that Japanese sensors can track. China is essentially building itself into a corner. The more they invest in traditional naval forces, the more vulnerable those forces become to Japan's technology. But abandoning those investments means conceding naval superiority in the Western Pacific. This is the dilemma, and it's one China doesn't have a good solution for. There is one potential countermeasure Chinese strategists are exploring: anti-stealth radar technology. Systems designed specifically to detect low observable vessels by analyzing their radar scatter patterns in novel ways. The problem is that Japanese ships aren't just low observable. They're designed with active cancellation technology that defeats even advanced anti-stealth radar. The mathematics of active cancellation are fundamentally difficult to overcome. You can't detect what actively cancels your signal. China could theoretically develop quantum radar systems that bypass active cancellation, but quantum radar remains theoretical. No nation has demonstrated operational quantum radar capability, and even if China achieves breakthrough, it would take years to deploy and integrate into naval operations. Meanwhile, Japan continues advancing. Japan's technology advantage isn't static, it's accelerating. This is why some defense analysts believe China is facing an insurmountable challenge in the Western Pacific, not because America's military is superior, but because America's allies have developed technology that negates China's primary advantage. Let's be clear about what that advantage is. China's naval power depends on submarines and missiles. Both require approaching targets without detection. Japan's technology eliminates that capability. Without undetected approach, China's entire naval strategy collapses. China can't fire missiles it can't target. China can't attack ships it can't find. And China's fleet becomes nothing more than a collection of expensive targets floating in waters controlled by allied detection systems. China has built the wrong navy for the wrong war. They invested everything in submarine and missile power, assuming detection technology would remain static. Japan's advancement proves that assumption wrong. Now China faces a decade of costly rebuilding just to achieve parity with technology that's already been surpassed. These are strong words, but the data supports them. We've spent a lot of time discussing technology, but technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists within strategic context, and Japan's invisible navy has implications that extend far beyond any single conflict scenario. Let's think about this systematically. First implication: Taiwan. Japan's technology fundamentally changes the military calculus surrounding Taiwanese defense. Chinese invasion plans depend on establishing air and naval superiority. Japan's capabilities make that superiority impossible to achieve. Chinese naval forces would be hunted in the waters surrounding Taiwan. Submarines would be detected and engaged before they could position for missile targeting. Surface vessels would be attacked from invisible positions. An invasion fleet would face devastation from weapons it couldn't see coming. This doesn't guarantee Taiwan's security. Nothing guarantees security, but it dramatically raises the cost of Chinese military action, and cost is often the deciding factor in strategic calculations. Second implication: South China Sea disputes. China's claim to the South China Sea depends partly on their ability to enforce those claims with military force. Japan's technology makes that enforcement extremely difficult. Chinese vessels operating in disputed waters would be vulnerable to detection and tracking. Every patrol, every enforcement action, every show of force would occur under the watchful eye of allied sensors they couldn't detect. This doesn't resolve the disputes, but it changes the power dynamic significantly. Third implication: American alliance credibility. Japan's technological advancement strengthens the American alliance structure in the Pacific. When allies have advanced capabilities, American commitment to their defense becomes more credible. Japan can demonstrate that allied forces provide genuine military value, not just political solidarity. Fourth implication: regional balance of power. Japan's advancement represents a fundamental shift in regional military balance. China no longer enjoys the numerical advantages they planned around. They face a qualitatively superior opponent backed by American technology and industrial capacity. This balance shift creates new dynamics in every interaction between regional powers. Japan gains leverage in diplomatic discussions. China faces constraints they didn't anticipate. American influence expands through alliance structure rather than direct intervention. These implications matter for reasons beyond military planning. They affect economic relationships, diplomatic negotiations, and regional stability. A shift in military balance creates ripples throughout every aspect of international relations. And here's what makes Japan's advancement so significant: it came from nowhere. 5 years ago, Japan wasn't considered a major naval technology innovator. They maintained defensive forces designed for homeland protection. Their doctrinal focus was on anti-submarine warfare, but not at the cutting edge of detection technology. Then something changed. American technology transfer accelerated, Japanese defense budgets increased, research programs produced breakthrough after breakthrough, and suddenly Japan possessed naval technology that exceeds anything China can match. This transformation didn't happen by accident. It represents deliberate strategic choice by American and Japanese planners to develop capabilities that counter Chinese naval expansion. The invisible navy is the result of years of coordinated investment and development. That coordination continues. Japan and America are already working on next-generation systems that will extend these advantages further. The technology we've discussed represents today's capability. The systems under development represent tomorrow's advantage. China is racing to catch up, but the finish line keeps moving. We've discussed technology extensively, but technology is nothing without the people who operate it. And Japan's invisible navy is powered by some of the most highly trained naval personnel in the world. The crews operating these advanced vessels undergo training programs that exceed anything in the Chinese Navy. American military advisors work directly with Japanese forces, transferring operational expertise that has been refined through decades of naval combat experience. This human capital advantage is often overlooked in comparisons of military capability. Hardware doesn't fight itself, ships don't operate autonomously. The difference between victory and defeat often comes down to the skill of the people pushing the buttons. Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force officers are selected from the brightest graduates of Japan's universities. They undergo years of specialized training in sonar interpretation, electronic warfare, and tactical decision-making. They operate in crews that train together constantly, developing the coordination that proves decisive in actual combat. Chinese naval personnel, by contrast, face different challenges. Rapid fleet expansion has created a need for enormous numbers of trained operators. Recruitment standards have been relaxed to fill positions. Experience levels have declined as senior personnel are stretched across more vessels. The technological gap we've discussed is compounded by a training and experience gap. Japanese crews know how to use their advanced systems optimally. They understand the tactical implications of what they're detecting. They make decisions based on years of pattern recognition training. This matters because the technology we're discussing requires human interpretation. Sonar signatures need to be analyzed. Detection data needs to be evaluated. Tactical decisions need to be made quickly based on incomplete information. The difference between good and excellent performance in these tasks can determine the outcome of engagements. Let me give you a specific example. Active cancellation sonar requires precise calibration to work effectively. The system needs to match incoming sonar frequencies with extraordinary accuracy. Small errors create detection rather than cancellation. Japanese sonar operators train extensively on this calibration. They practice in simulation environments that replicate real-world conditions. They develop the instinct to detect calibration drift before it compromises system effectiveness. Chinese operators, working with less sophisticated systems and shorter training cycles, may not develop the same level of proficiency, and in a combat situation, that proficiency gap could prove decisive. This isn't speculation about Chinese incompetence. It's acknowledgement that experience and training create advantages that hardware alone cannot overcome. And Japan has significant advantages in both categories. We've covered what Japan has developed. We've analyzed how it counters Chinese capabilities. We've examined the broader strategic implications. Now let's look forward. What comes next? Japan is developing systems that extend these advantages further. The next generation of Japanese destroyers will feature integrated quantum sensors capable of detecting vessels at ranges that seem impossible today. Active cancellation technology will be refined to defeat even experimental anti-stealth radar. AI-assisted tactical systems will accelerate decision-making to levels human operators cannot match. Simultaneously, America is developing systems that will transfer to Japan in coming years. The collaborative research programs between American defense contractors and Japanese defense manufacturers continue to produce breakthroughs. Each breakthrough adds another layer to the technological advantage allied forces enjoy. China is investing heavily in catching up, but they face structural challenges that limit their ability to close the gap. American technology embargoes prevent China from acquiring certain advanced components. Domestic research programs struggle with the fundamental physics challenges involved, and the time required to translate research into operational capability creates persistent gaps. This doesn't mean China will never match allied technology. Eventually they will, but by then allied forces will have advanced further. The goalposts keep moving, and the technology gap that exists today will persist for the foreseeable future. This matters for you to understand because it changes the long-term strategic outlook for the Pacific. The balance of naval power is shifting in ways that favor allied forces. China faces a decades-long challenge to close the gap they've fallen behind in. And during that time, the strategic leverage enjoyed by America and its allies will be substantial. This doesn't guarantee conflict resolution in China's favor. Wars can still happen, mistakes can still occur, accidents can still escalate, but the military balance that would shape any such conflict increasingly favors the Allied side. Japan's invisible navy is more than technology. It's a statement about the future of Pacific security. It says that American alliance structures can generate capabilities that fundamentally alter regional dynamics. It says that qualitative advantage can trump quantitative superiority. And it says that China's massive military investments may not purchase the regional dominance they sought. This is why this story matters, this is why we're discussing it, and this is why you need to stay informed about developments like these. The invisible navy isn't just a weapons system, it's a strategic revolution, and it's happening right now in the waters of the Western Pacific while most of the world isn't paying attention. Let's bring everything together. Let's establish what we know, what we believe, and what it means. Here's what we know with high confidence. Japan has developed advanced sonar invisible technology for surface vessels. Japan has deployed systems that significantly extend detection ranges for submarines. Japan has modified existing destroyers with radar-absorbing features that reduce their detectability. America's defense industry has been deeply involved in developing these capabilities. Here's what intelligence sources indicate with reasonable confidence. Japanese destroyers have been conducting operations in waters near Taiwan under conditions of complete invisibility to Chinese detection. Exercise results have demonstrated capabilities that exceed Chinese ability to counter. Next-generation systems are in advanced development stages. Here's what we analyze based on available information. China's naval strategy depends on capabilities that Japan's technology negates. China's response options are limited and each involves significant compromises. The strategic balance in the Western Pacific is shifting toward allied forces in ways that will persist for years. And here's what it all means. Japan has achieved something extraordinary. They've built a navy that China's forces cannot effectively counter. They've created technology that renders China's massive investment less valuable. They've demonstrated that American alliance partnerships can generate capabilities that fundamentally alter regional dynamics. This doesn't mean China is helpless. They're not. They retain significant military capabilities that could cause tremendous damage in any conflict, but it does mean the military balance has shifted in ways that constrain Chinese options and expand Allied flexibility. Japan's invisible navy changes everything. Thank you for watching this analysis. I know we've covered complex material, but I believe understanding these developments is critical for anyone interested in global security and geopolitics. The competition for Pacific dominance is the defining strategic contest of our era, and Japan's technological advancement just shifted that contest in significant ways. If you found this analysis valuable, please take a moment to like this video. Your support helps us continue producing the in-depth content you're watching right now. Subscribe to this channel if you want to stay informed about developments in global military strategy, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our future coverage. We have more revealing content planned, content that will help you understand the strategic landscape shaping our world, content you won't find anywhere else. Until next time, stay informed, stay critical, and remember, in geopolitics, knowledge is power. The invisible navy represents something profound about the nature of modern military competition. It's not about who's biggest, it's not about who's loudest, it's about who can see what others cannot. Japan has achieved that vision. China is scrambling to catch up, and the waters of the Western Pacific will never look the same.